Hello and welcome back to the Nine Sports Podcast. My name is Kathleen and I host the weekly soccer edition of our show. It was a crazy week in the NWSL, so we are going to jump right in. And a quick shout out to Julie Schreiber, an editor over at the Nine Sports and the Nine Soccer, who did a great job recapping week 2 in an article she titled Red Cards, Upsets, and Rivalries. And boy, was this weekend full of all of those. The most notable was the Cascadia rivalry between Portland and Seattle, which was played on Friday. This was the 44th installment of the game. The Thorns won 2-0, but that is just the very tip of the iceberg when it comes to interesting things about this game. The Thorns were down to 9 players by the end of the game. They went down to 10, just 10 minutes in, and both of their goals came after that first send-off. Pietro Torden and Rylan Turner scored their goals, and Torden has now contributed to all 3 of Portland's goals this year. So a really exciting start for her. I'm very interested to see what she'll be able to contribute to Portland this year. As you know, we've talked a lot about Sophia Smith coming back and a lot of the other stars of this team. But a little bit of uncertainty too with the new coach and losing some other key pieces there in the off season. A couple more stats that really stood out to me. Seattle actually led shots 17-8 in this one. Both teams had 4 shots on target. So definitely you wouldn't think that Seattle would have lost this one 2-0, especially with everything else that went on, but just a really impressive performance, I think, from Portland, if we're focusing on that side of it, to keep that composure going down to score those 2 goals and to get a shutout as well at home in this big kind of rivalry game. So let's hear from 2 of their stars and what they had to say after the match.
Oh, great, honestly. I think that goes for everybody. But yeah, honestly, it feels like a fever dream, to be honest. I'm like, was that even real? But honestly, it feels great.
I mean, we had 9 players on the field and we just did that. So I think it really is just kind of a shock right now, but it also just kind of speaks the volumes for what our team is this year. We kind of talked about this week that it was going to be a fight in a gritty game. The whole week we were talking about that, Seattle, but we just kind of came in knowing that we need to play hard. And I think with whatever the refs' decisions were with the red cards, like we took it on the chin and we did what we had to do. And we just locked down back there. So yeah, it's crazy.
And then can you kind of talk about that team defensive effort? Because basically you got the first red in the 10th-ish. And then
yeah.
And then you still had 30 minutes to play when the second one went off.
Yeah. Again, like on the field when that's happening, like it's just kind of like you gotta take what happens. You just gotta kind of move on. And I think coach did a great job kind of starting us back, putting Marie in, and then kind of adjusting us into a back 5. I think that was a smart move, especially with Seattle already wanting to kind of overload the back line. And we just kind of dug deep and we did what we had to do back there.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it was a big collective effort, and I think it shows the trust that we have as a group. At least for me, like up top, knowing that my midfield has my back and knowing that my defense has my back as well is huge. And I feel like we all felt that on the field, even though we don't like explicitly say it to each other. I think it's something that's a feeling, and I think that really speaks to this game in general. I think it was a trust game and everybody trusts each other on the field. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty easy to trust the back line when you got someone like her back there. So
and great questions from Taylor there as well to get some really great answers from Pietra and Emma Vignola. I really like how they described it as a fever dream. I mean, it definitely felt like that, whether you were watching it or whether you were just watching the scoreline from a distance. Just one of those really, really odd games, and one that really honestly kind of makes me miss NWSL After Dark on Twitter. I know we're still building it up on Blue Sky, but we really need to bring that energy back to social media. And just really, I love doing those little watch-alongs, and I think that has made this whole soccer community so special and is one of my favorite things about the soccer community. So petition to get everybody really, really back into NWSL After Dark, and I will be right there with you after probably the end of the NCAA Women's Basketball Tournament, which I am traveling for the next 2 weeks. I also clipped a couple of thoughts from their coach that I'll play here in a second. And again, another great question from Taylor, who asked about comparing this to the London Derby, and how that rivalry kind of stands up in his opinion.
I think I've heard so much about this stadium, this fan base, and this club, and to experience it was amazing. And then the game becomes what it becomes, and then we actually win with the fans because of that. And I think the players are amazing to find a way to win this game, because it was tough to play with one less player than two less players, but I'm so proud of them.
And then in your experience, what is more intense, a North London derby or the Cascadia rivalry?
I can promise you that the Women's Super League have something to learn from this team and this atmosphere. There's nowhere near the noise. Obviously, it's great in London as well, but there's something else here with the passion and everything. So it was the best experience I've ever had. Even when I played in the men's game, it was amazing.
We will have lots more later in the show on Arsenal and Chelsea, but elsewhere around the NWSL, we did get the return of Andi Sullivan and Tierna Davidson. For Sullivan, this was her first match since October 2024. She is recovering from that ACL tear and went on maternity leave. Tierna Davidson also missed most of last year with an ACL tear. So wishing for smooth recoveries for both of them and successful returns. Spirit and Gotham both earned draws in those games, and Spirit came back from down 2-0. So always good to see that resilience again. Barbara Banda scored on her birthday for Orlando as they came back to tie Denver. Really interesting week for Denver as they pick up the club's first ever point. They also grabbed Yasmin Ryan and Delaney Sheehan from Houston and signed Yuzuki Yamamoto. Really interesting to see how they are kind of bolstering that team as they await the arrival of Lindsay Heaps at the end of the season, and her WSL campaign. They have their home opener coming up this weekend. Rowan Shaberg from our team at the 9 Sports will be there on site to report on the sights and sounds of the home opener at Empower Field at Mile High Stadium. Quite the mouthful there. But let us know if you go and how you're feeling after these first few matches. It seems like this team is going to be a lot of fun to watch this year. And, I admit I like those kits a lot more on the field than I did at first glance, but really nice work from them on kind of the branding side so far. And I'm looking for a little more from Boston. Boston's still looking for their first points, but hopefully that is coming soon. They obviously had that great season opener, and it seems like a lot of good energy out there, but waiting for that product on the field to kind of come together. And then another exciting move that we've been watching, Jordan Heidema and her debut for Chicago. She did score against Kansas City this weekend, she and Tessa Della Rose, and handed Kansas City its first loss, the reigning Shield winners. That was a very cold, very windy game. Not a lot of fans in the stands, but the fans that were there were loud and passionate on that stream. So it'll be interesting to see what Chicago can put together, and if Kansas City can kind of figure this out. They've got a super busy week. They are one of those teams that has the Wednesday game and the weekend game. So a really tough road stretch here for Kansas City, but we'll have to see how they respond tomorrow night and then over the weekend as well, with a lot of new pieces. They are still awaiting the return of Temwa Shawinga to the lineup, but do have Michelle Cooper back. They have Lola Bonta available, and a lot of those pieces starting to hopefully come together there. But again, we will see. Our number one at the 9, our top story of the week from Annie Peterson, about the return of Savy King, another player we were really looking forward to seeing return to the pitch. She started for Angel City in their 3-1 win this weekend. She played 80 minutes. This was her first time back on the pitch after that cardiac event last May. Super scary situation, but it sounds like she not only has had a ton of club support and support from around the league, but has made a healthy recovery and will hopefully be in a much better situation going forward. A lot more attention on her and hopefully preventing anything like that from happening again in the future. I really liked this quote that Annie included. I for sure have gone through ups and downs, but for the most part, I am just grateful that I'm able to play again. I feel that comes from my perspective of life just completely changing. I feel like sometimes when you do something over and over again, you get comfortable and not necessarily complacent, but you take things for granted of being able to just go out there and do what you love every day. And for a second, I thought that was taken away from me. So again, just rooting for this very young player and a healthy future for her and successful return. A lot of eyes will be on her as Angel City continues to play, and we hopefully get a lot more Savy King in the NWSL in the future. As I mentioned earlier, we are keeping close eyes on the UWCL, where Wolfsburg beat Lyon 1-0 at home today. And then right before we started recording, Arsenal beat Chelsea 3-1. Stina Blackstenius, Chloe Kelly, and Alessia Russo scored for Arsenal. Lauren James scored for Chelsea. Arsenal's the defending champion. They have one more leg of these quarterfinals to face Chelsea again. That game will be at Stamford Bridge on April 1st. This was a really interesting one where Arsenal ended up going up 2-0, and Lauren James was able to cut into that lead, but Alessia Russo did score that third goal to put the game out of reach. And it just looked like great energy there. I know this is a series people have been really looking forward to, kind of maybe an unexpected match in the quarterfinals, because it seems like these two just are destined to meet over and over again with the stakes really high. The quarterfinals will continue tomorrow with two more of those first leg matches between Real Madrid and Barcelona, and then Manchester United and Bayern. Then semifinals come at the end of April, and the final will be May 23rd in Oslo. And it's been a really interesting week of rumors as well in the WSL, with names like Sam Kerr and Millie Bright being thrown around as potentially moving to the NWSL at the end of their contracts. Kat Macario is expected to sign with San Diego as another big move. I, for one, would love to see Kerr back in the NWSL. Obviously, she and her wife both have ties to the U.S. and to the NWSL as well. Sam Kerr set the record with 18 goals in the 2019 season for Chicago, before Kansas City's Temwa Shawinga ended up breaking that in 2024 with 20. Kerr had such a dominant and exciting run in the NWSL in those early years, playing for the Western New York Flash and Sky Blue FC. Shout out to the teams no longer with us. I'll include FC Kansas City on that list, although they're kind of back in a way. She's got 2 goals in 14 matches with Chelsea this year and is really looking like herself after that ACL tear. She has 2 goals in 14 games with Chelsea this year, and it would just be, I think, really fascinating to have the Australian captain here, see if we can create a little bit of a pipeline there for the NWSL, and just really continually adding to that conversation about whether the NWSL is on par with the WSL, whether it's maybe moving slightly ahead, depending on how you look at it. And I think this is going to be such a critical offseason for the WSL, with a lot of big name players coming off of their contracts, especially on those Arsenal and Chelsea teams that we've talked about, that have a lot of those really exciting players that the US is extremely aware of, partially because of the number of U.S. players on those teams as well. Maybe we see Emily Fox return, who knows. That is it for me this week, but make sure you tune in to our hockey and basketball shows. The Ice Garden crew did a great job covering the Frozen Four, and I am sure they will be talking about Wisconsin's big win, 2 in a row there for the Badgers. Then on the basketball side, we are getting a new WNBA CBA finally, and we are sending staff to both Sacramento and Fort Worth for the NCAA regionals. You will also want to check out Women's Sports Daily for your 5-minute roundup every weekday of all the latest headlines in women's sports. And just as a reminder, that is on a separate feed, but you should be able to find it anywhere you listen to your podcasts at Women's Sports Daily. Thank you again, and I'll see you soon.